I stubbed my toe on this. Ow. That's toe breaker. That's a toe breaker. Now that I think about it, you know. There's another toe breaker. That's a toe breaker. Oh, God. Toe breaker. Yep, my poor little baby's purple, black. Trying not to walk on it too much. First time I broke my big toe, which is hopefully the last time. Walked on it all night, 4th of July party. It was terrible. Big mistake. The next day, my toe was swole up. It was black, blue, and purple. Twice the size of what it was supposed to be. Yep. So, I took my sock off today and looked at my toe. It's a little toe. And, it's not swole up double. But, it was from all that walking. So, maybe if I would have been walking, it would be swole up double by now. But, because I remember it took like 2 days. It took like 2 days for my toe to swell up, and then I went to the hospital. Then I learned they couldn't do anything about it. They gave me some pain pills. So, you can't really do anything about a broken toe. So just don't walk on it. Too much. Damn, lemon water went bad. Yo, that lemon water went bad. I ain't drinking it. And my big toe's alright. It just hurts sometimes. Put too much pressure on it, like trying to do some powerlifting or sprinting, running. It'll hurt. Like if I have boots on that are too tight, And if I'm at work all day, it might start hurting. Um, but usually if you push through it, it stops hurting. To call you daddy. What up, anti-furry daddy? AD, sub bruv. What up, AD? What up, Div? Roast you? Let me put Div in the oven with some shish kebabs. Some carrots, some potatoes. No, I'm just playing. Div, your mama should have whooped you harder. Yeah, kinda. Oh yeah, definitely around my shaft. I don't like the hair around my shaft. Shout out to laser hair removal. My quality's like 8 bits. That's fucking funny. God damn. I got 8-bit quality, so ain't no sense in worrying about what I look like, huh? That's crazy. You lose a bet. What up, O? Lose a bet. Go to the horse races. Go to the casino where they got horse races and go bet on a horse race. Bet. 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 I bet my toe heel. I bet my toe heel fast. You look like a white circle with a brown line on top. That is so messed up, man. I got the worst live stream because it's so bad, like the quality. Man, I see some people's live stream and it looks like it looks pretty good. It looks like 360, 720. What up, Nathan Boardman? What a crap. I know, man. It's like so much crap. It's like you really got to be picky in life if you don't want to deal with so much crap. I mean, like, you know, I was aggravated a long time ago. I should have called the internet company back then. But, I didn't really have a reason except for video games, so I didn't. Now that I'm on YouTube, I kind of have a reason to improve my internet. I mean, for real. If y'all got crappy internet, try to get it good. If you have just a little bit of ambition when it comes to like you're debating on making videos, editing, because the more you edit a video, the more you put graphics in it and stuff, the longer it's gonna take to upload, which is what I learned real hard. Like the upload speed, it's my upload speed that they're giving me that makes it so terrible. It's like the upload speed is when you wanna, it's when you wanna put anything on the internet, whether it's a video or what. My upload speed is terrible. It's like 56K. It's like, it says it's like 300 kilobytes. But when you get down to it, it's gonna be like 56K, 60 something. Anyways, yeah, my toe hurts. Fuck this fucking chair. You motherfucker. This is the chair that fucking broke my toe. Because I took the wheels off of it. I took the wheels off of it, and that's pretty much why I broke my toe. If I'd have kept the wheels on it, it might not would have stuck on the floor so hard when I walked over it, when I walked right into it. I walked right into it. Would I rather watch a tree grow or a knee grow? I don't know what that's supposed to mean. But if the trees are small and they're spaced out pretty good, they'll double in size in less than 10 years. A little spooky. A little spooky. Sometimes I say the N-word. Sometimes I call myself an N-word. I don't like feeling like I'm an N-word. I'm chill. I'm chill. I wish everybody could be chill sometimes. How do you activate chill mode? Shit, my toe need to activate heal mode. Man. This is why rooms don't need to be too small. You walk in and you stub your toe. Shit, the only way I could fix that is turning a single wide into a double wide. I never had a double wide. Y'all ever had a double wide? I went and stayed at a friend's house. He had a double wide. Couple friends, William and Mitch. Mitch moved away and went to go work on houses. He moved to the desert. Went to go work on houses, like blueprint architecture stuff. Because I remember he was living with his mama. But he did go to where he said he was going to move to. He moved to the desert, Arizona, the big city in Arizona. One time I had a dream I was visiting him, and we was around, like, the dream was in the suburbs, and I was in somebody's yard by the road. I was in the road, like on the sidewalk, chilling with Mitch. And then the other dude, William, his daddy bought him a double wide mobile home, and it was smaller than the other one. Like, that was a small double wide. Mitch's mama had a bigger double wide home, trailer, manufactured home than William. It's like they make these double wide manufactured homes small. There's the small ones that are the size of a regular 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. I stayed in one of those. That was the boss man's. I was little, I used to tear up the walls. I was tearing up the walls. I'm surprised my daddy didn't whoop my ass. But I remember doing that. I was little, like 7 years old, tearing up the walls. Because they was drywall. I'm not chill on alcohol. I'm not chill on alcohol. That's why I don't drink it no more. And then I forget too much. Yeah, a little spooky. I'm chill right now because I'm trying to let my toe heal. It's gonna be a while. The importance of shoes. Let me tell you, shoes are really important. I instantly regretted taking my shoes off, which I don't normally do. I don't normally take my shoes off before coming in. Yeah, there's lots of grass, but I just wipe it off on the rug, and then I'll get the sides with a rag, so it ain't too much, but definitely the vacuum cleaner does some work. Oh, fuck. Nobody's on overpass. Nobody's on overpass. Everybody's on the free games. I'm trying to download a free game. Like, what the fuck? Joined. Yay, somebody bought overpass. Bonus 4-pack. Yeah, fucking bonus 4-pack, baby. What a name. Let me tell y'all something. I do feel better around people. But when I'm alone, I don't want to be around people. Ain't that a weird paradox? They call that a paradox. I think that's what they call a paradox. I think. Alright, I readied up. Man, trolls, the trolls on here seem to like me because I've noticed that it's about 3 of them, 4 of them so far, and yeah, you know, you got to be good at handling people. If you can't handle people, you're gonna act indifferent. So you have to try to understand their perspective. You know, I mean, man, let me tell y'all, man, I'm a troll too. I was called a troll on PlayStation. Some dude was calling me a troll because I was trolling. It's fun on YouTube too, I guess. It's just more funner with the audio, you know. Did not finish. Why does it disconnect like that? Now I gotta do this whole race by myself. And I wasted my life with the cheap, slow internet. I had to restart. And then they started ripping me off. Alright, when you get stuck, you gotta back up. If you got a diff lock, well then you're a professional off-roader if it's got a diff lock. Then you put it in and you want to take it out. You don't want to have it in all the time. You'll fuck it up. Man, my toe is straight broke. It's healing. It's healing. It's gonna heal. Ah, flipped it again. Hey, I need to get one of those jobs where it's like an audio book. I should do that Audible. Wow, there's an invisible rock on here. I'm on the last lap. Back up. My toe hurts. Flipped it again. Whoa. Whoa. Come the fuck on. This is incredible. Woo! Bonus 4-pack left. Yo, what up, Darnell Dodge? Man, I stubbed my toe yesterday on the chair. You thought you was banned from YouTube? You was making a lot of comments and then you got your comments reported so you couldn't make any more comments? Or what's going on? Yeah, my toe hurts. I'm letting my toe heal because I probably broke it. So I just yeah, you like to talk. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, Darnell Dodge coming in the comments strong. Somebody didn't like what Darnell Dodge has to say. You see it when the chat goes crazy and people are commenting like too fast and somebody will make a comment like, I reported that or some shit. I know, it's like, you wanna clear your data. There's the option to clear your data. You could delete all your comments at once. If you go in the account settings on your YouTube, you can click on the little gear. It's a little gear like this, and you go on the settings, and then you go to options that are in the settings, and you go to clear chat, clear live chat, and you can clear that, all your comments. Might just be some people's chats. Yeah, it might be some people's chats. You're right, because when I'm live streaming, if I don't press the chat and reset the chat, it gets stuck. Cause like last time I couldn't even see your messages in the chat because my internet disconnected, and then when it reconnected, I didn't reset this chat right here, and so I didn't see any of your messages until I did that. By the time I did that, it was like a long time had passed, and you would send like 10 or 12 messages in the chat. Yeah, that chat. I always get surprised when I'm on somebody's live stream and they call my name in the chat. Yeah, you could go to the gear, go to the settings, and it's a little gear. It looks like a gear. And then go to like account settings. And if you go all the way down on account settings, you're gonna see clear live chat. Two-way cams. Yeah, they need to let me do the two-way cam. Just like anybody in the chat. Yeah, I just learned that the other day. I saw that the other day and I was like, wow, that's a cool option. I like that. Because you can make your watch time private, your watched videos private, You can make your or public. You can turn off your online status. You can it's called incognito mode. Yeah. You can make your subscriptions private or public, so like people could see them, or at least the first 20 of them or something. Yeah. Yeah, Darnell, it's on your account settings. Like, I had to clear the cache. I had to learn how to clear the cache because my memory was getting clogged up, and it let me clear the cache on YouTube and Spotify, and it's a lot. It's like a lot of data. It's like almost half a gigabyte when I clear it, and it's like it's a lot of memory. You're welcome. This shit is not hard. I mean, this shit is not easy. Yep, YouTube coming in with the cool options. It's like they still want us to have fun, and that's good. We should have more fun. Yeah, we're all slowly becoming more and more tech dummies. You're a tech dummy? We're all slowly becoming tech dummies. They say we won't know how AI works, but a lot of people saying that don't even be scared of AI. It ain't even that good. It's basically just a calculator for the encyclopedia with books and literature. All depends on the program. I'm a dummy when it comes to programming. We're all dummies. They're gonna use AI to program. That's weird. Yo, what up, Bloxo Blast? Yeah, technology is really weird. It's like they was using the microscope and chemistry at the same time and putting them together and stuff like that. It's like you're only gonna like advance technology if you go to college and they teach you some weird stuff for like a year. Always scared of 2-year college, 3-year college, 4-year college. I don't see how people do it. It's like high school was 4 years. If only college was cheaper. $15,000 a year is too much. You got 14 swimming lessons today? Wow. I know you was hungry. Remember how hungry you get from swimming? Yeah, you too. Have a good one, Darnell. No problem. Or at least that's what I think it is. Nighty night. It's morning for you. Yeah, it's morning. NP and bet. Wonder how they pronounce that. Yo, what up, Thundra Man? Hello, Thundra Man. Thundra Man coming in with the Russian. Bet. I see bet at the end of that. And there's two N's, but one of them's backwards. And one of them's a giant, small N. Cactabon Aina. Cactabon Aina. Cactabon Aina. I have no idea. You know, when the Russian and the Asian starts coming through, I'm not gonna know anything. There's so many European languages I don't know. And yeah, Thundra Man. Man. Is that what that is? Good morning, Thundra Man. How are you? I'm okay. I hurt my toe. I hurt my toe. Bliata. When I hurt my toe, I was like, Bliata. Bliata. When I hurt my toe yesterday, I was like, Bliata. Bliata. Yeah, Russian, learning other languages is hard. It's very hard. That chair was hard. Thanks, Bruno Severo. Privet. What is privet? Oh, privet is high. Bloxoblast. Bloxoblast is coming through with the Google translations on Russian. Privet is high. Wow. Man, them Russian women are so pretty, dude. I saw this Russian live streamer the other day. She was live streaming and she was eating like some pasta and some tomato sauce or something, like salad. And then she had this whole pickle and she was like sitting in the kitchen with this whole pickle and this whole salad and just like eating that. And she was like so beautiful, but she looked like she was really, really, really bored. How can you say you got a fat ass in Russian? I have no idea, but definitely if you go to the Google Translator and then you click on the thing after you translate it, it's a little like audio speaker. It'll say it for you. And then they got this new Chat GPT stuff that'll translate it in real time with one side on this language and somebody on this side with another language, and if they're saying it, like it'll translate it in real time for you. I can say Slovo. Slovo. I don't know what she was eating. It wasn't spaghetti, but it kind of looked like pasta salad. It was pasta salad. Later, Thundra Man. In Russia, Thundra Man. Bliata. I gotta learn some more Russian. I got like 2 people in Russian so far that are talking to me. I know the Russian mud runner. Azov. There's big trucks. It's like B-72. They're numbers with a letter. They have weird names. Massive trucks. Yeah, I'm alright, man. I got that Doja and I fucking hurt my toe. See you later, Bloxo Blast. Y'all have a good one. Privet. 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 Oh, the importance of shoes. I need to go buy me some lace-up shoes that are like boots, work boots. You know, like the military does, like the loggers, probably construction workers too. They lace up at least like 9 inches. There's the 6 inch, then the 9 inch. I was looking at them, but I don't like them too heavy. Heavy boots are a bad choice. And that's why they have house shoes. Fuck, so the house shoes are supposed to be over there. So you take off your real shoes and immediately put on your house shoes. Hey. I don't like being all psychological, philosophical. It wears me out, man. The brain is a muscle. They say it's full of fat, but it sure does use a lot of energy. I know. Y'all want to see my toe, but it's just like the tip of it. The thumbnail is okay. I mean, the toenail is okay, but like behind the toenail, it's black. It's not swollen that much. It's the same as it was. Probably because I wasn't walking on it. Alright, I'll show you. Fuck. It's only 8 pixels anyways. Oh! Damn. Fuck. You see it? That toe got fucked up. Ow. Yep. You know what I'm saying? The importance of shoes. I'm done with these soft shoes. They are so comfortable to walk in, but they didn't hurt me though. I took my shoes off. Hey, 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 you don't lie. Hey, 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 you don't lie. I can feel unstoppable. Hey, 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 you don't lie. No. No. 80% of homes fostering chronic illness? No. My toe. Ah. The human body is fragile, let me tell you. It's important what we eat and everything.
Hello, everyone. I'm talking today to Dr. Richie Shoemaker and Dr. Scott McMahon, and they are cardinal investigators into a problem known as chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And you probably haven't heard that before. But for fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, and you've certainly heard of conditions like Alzheimer's and other degenerative neurological conditions, Doctors Shoemaker and McMahon think that they have discovered, with the help of other people, obviously, at least one potential pathway to such conditions, and that has to do with toxins in buildings. So the basic theory is something like this. A substantial number of buildings, especially those built with drywall using antifungal paints, have water damage. That water damage produces biotoxins of various sorts. For a substantial proportion of the population, about 25%, exposure to those biotoxins produces an immunological response that has all sorts of neurological and behavioral negative consequences. And so I found out about this through my daughter, who's been wrestling with health disorders of various sorts for her whole life. She's convinced me that it was at least worth some investigation, and that's what I'm doing. And so I read some of these gentlemen's research papers, and they struck me as highly credible, and so I'm talking to them today to find out just what there is to this. If they're right, about 20% of the population is suffering from all sorts of conditions, often diagnosed as other illnesses, depression included. And that's actually a consequence of exposure to biotoxins in water damaged buildings.
What?
And this also seems to be a particular problem, by the way, among the military, low grade military housing, much of it water damaged and mold infested.
Oh
And the
no.
government, by the way, seems to agree with that assessment, even though not enough has been done about that so far.
Hydrogen peroxide.
Come along for the ride. That's what we're talking about today. Dr.
Seal the
Shoemaker,
corners
Dr.
better.
McMahon, welcome to the program. I'm very interested in talking to you guys today. My daughter has alerted me to your work, and I've been looking into it for the last 4 or 5 months. You guys have been studying something called chronic inflammatory response syndrome, and the more I've looked into this, the deeper the rabbit hole goes, I suppose you could say that. And I thought the best way to educate myself and potentially everyone else who's listening and watching would be to have you guys on this podcast so I could ask you all sorts of questions. And so I'm going to take a friendly, skeptical approach, if you don't mind, because what you're studying is of such magnitude that if you're correct, it's a catastrophe. And so we can all hope that you're not correct so that it isn't a catastrophe. But I know you've accumulated a substantial amount of evidence. And so maybe we'll start with you, Dr. Shoemaker. Do you want to just tell everybody what it is you've been studying and why you started studying it and how widespread you think the problem is?
Most people have a sense of what inflammation is. Our body is looking at environmental stressors that must be dealt with, and the inflammatory process, as a general rule, is part of the environmental response to the trauma or stress. Inflammation can be of two kinds. One is acquired, or allergy, or kind of the adaptive way that the body will learn how to make antibodies and respond to stressors with memory. So these things will be experienced once, and then the twice is the next time. It's just very quick. But we're looking at a different form, the left hand, if you will, compared to the right hand, of innate immune responses, in which the response to an antigen or a foreign particle that's introduced in the body in many different ways. Inhalation is certainly the big way I worry about, but it could be elsewhere. But specifically, once there is antigen detection by the innate immune response system, there should be processing of an antigen and putting on a HLA molecule or histocompatibility locus A molecule on the antigen and packaging it in antigen presenting cells to a naive lymphocyte, just waiting for something to happen. And when the naive lymphocyte sees this tasty little morsel of package with HLA and an antigen on it, it should turn on a kind of T cell, or a B cell, to make an antibody. The problem with the illness that we have is that over 95% of the patients do not have antigen processing correctly, so that antibodies are made in a reduced fashion, if at all. And when we look at now, what control do we have on inflammation if the stimulus is not stopped? And it doesn't have to be ongoing exposure. It is now in this world of antigen interaction with antigen-presenting cells and T lymphocytes that has gone awry. And the illnesses that we see become chronic because antibody formation does not occur. Now, over the years, we knew about problems with antigen presentation, but now we know the gene mechanisms behind defective antigen presentation and the gene mechanisms to not only include inflammation in our venues, but also abnormalities in metabolism. So if we look at metabolic molecular hypometabolism, which is a fancy way of saying that 95% of patients with chronic fatigue have a specific abnormality in inflammation and metabolism that we can show with genetic makeup. And then with Scott's work and my work, we've been able to show that we can correct the gene activation when it's not supposed to be activated and correct gene suppression when it's not supposed to be suppressed. So what we're looking at is the transcriptomic or gene representative theory of illness causation and illness correction. our last paper, and I hope you had a chance to take a look at it, but it's in your inbox if you didn't. The next question is now we're looking at, to me, the holy grail, and that's correction of dieback central nervous system degeneration. You may hear it called Alzheimer's, you may hear it called Parkinson's, you may hear that same called for atrophic myotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS, but we are there. We're there with gene activation and correction with our therapies that have been developed over the last 27 years.
Okay, so you're going after a host of immunological diseases, including extraordinarily widespread conditions like Alzheimer's. Dr. McMahon, do you want to explain to everybody?
A number of potential triggers that can cause the innate immune system to activate. And as Dr. Shoemaker pointed out, these people, or at least around 90% of them, don't have adequate or effective antibody production to help mitigate when there is chronic exposure. So the innate immune system is then basically left to handle this by itself without the antibody cavalry coming in and reducing the burden. And if you are living or working or going to school in a water-damaged building where there is increased dampness or increased microbial growth from molds or bacteria or actinobacteria or all of the above, when you inhale those, your body recognizes those as being foreign antigens. And it's not just, for instance, say mold spores. It can be old, dead mold spores that have lost their integrity, their cell wall is broken apart into hundreds of fragments. And in fact, those fragments, when you inhale them, go even deeper down your respiratory tract into your lung, and again, trigger the innate immune system. As a response to that, the innate immune system will overproduce cytokines in the same way that you would overproduce cytokines if you got the flu, or if you got COVID, or some other kind of viral infection. And these fragments trigger the innate immune system and the overproduction of the cytokines. And then the cytokines cause the symptoms that we commonly relate to with the flu, which could include headaches, muscle aches, joint pains, fatigue, malaise, difficulty sleeping, coughing, other respiratory issues, brain fog, etc., etc.
Okay, so let me get the whole sequence of this straight. So what you guys have been studying is sometimes just, and stop me, at any point if I get any of this wrong. Sometimes people refer to this as sick building syndrome. You've brought in conditions like Alzheimer's and other immunological diseases, chronic fatigue syndrome. I know you've concentrated to some degree too on fibromyalgia. So the idea is that there are many buildings, and we'll talk about how many, but there are many buildings that harbor airborne pathogens, mold being first and foremost among them, perhaps. That's much more likely in buildings that have been water damaged and not properly remediated. The consequence of that is that if people are in those buildings, living in them or working in them, that they're chronically exposed to pathogens that can trigger an immune response. And some people, when that immune response is triggered, they're not producing antibodies in a proper manner. And there are genetic reasons for that, and possibly metabolic reasons as well. And then is it the combination of the pathogens that are in the local environment plus the genetic weakness or the metabolic problems that produce this cytokine storm that you associated with flu-like symptoms and pain and chronic inflammation? Now, and have I got all that right? Is that the way this lays itself out?
You're doing great. Keep on.
That's excellent.
Okay, good. So let's go through that one by one then. The first issue is then, what percentage of buildings in North America and elsewhere in the world do you think are suffering from this problem? And if it's a large number of buildings, that's obviously a catastrophe. So what's the evidence for this, and why did you guys become convinced of this?
What we have seen is a similarity of the syndrome of acute exposure followed by chronic exposure wherever the person might live. It's not confined to Florida or Hawaii. Could be in Nepal, or could be in the 8 degrees year-round. No wind, no rain, no change of the seasons indoors, And the mark of every one of these indoor places is water intrusion. So if we look to see, is there a water damaged building, we should be able to find an ecosystem of organisms. Now you mentioned fungi, and I've written books, Surviving Mold and Mold Warriors, out of the best evidence at the time, and that was wrong. We know that fungi have a role, but we also know that endotoxins from bacteria are second on the list, and first is actinobacteria. And when you look at every building that's water damaged that has these ecologic parameters, you find the same symptoms, the same laboratory findings, and now that we have access to gene evaluation, the same gene activation, and the likelihood that this would be due to something else becomes a statistical problem. In some of Scott's work, he's published that the likelihood is that you've got a p-value of less than, p is less than 1 to the minus 50th power. So it could be the same in Stuttgart if the Lewis was the same, but actually statistically the idea that it's not the same is so remote to be impossible.
Okay, so Scott, what proportion of modern buildings, first of all, is it modern buildings that are particularly affected? And if not, or if so, what proportion of buildings in general are we talking about? And are there specific kinds of buildings that appear more susceptible? I read in some of the work of yours that I reviewed, for example, that drywall seems to be a particular problem. So what kind of, how widespread is this problem, do you suppose? And what buildings are particularly affected?
Well, the EPA has published, the United States Environmental Protection Agency has published that at least 50% of the buildings and up to 85% of the buildings in the United States are historically water damaged.
Buildings that are involved are not due to one era of construction or another. With modern structures put up quickly, contractors investing money, he wants to turn over the house, sale quickly, so you may not wait for a master plumber to put in the bathroom and a plumbing leak can develop. Construction defects for new homes are a real bugaboo. But even when we were in Scotland in the castles from the 1200s and before, we saw the same kinds of problems. But in the older buildings where they had not been paints used with fungicides in them, for example, we didn't find the same organisms making toxins the way we do in the newer buildings. And about in 1970, when the population got all upset with the oil embargoes and houses were made to be tighter, we thought that that was the reason for the problem. It was actually not, because what we were using were paints and sealants to keep down mold growth. What we did was create natural selection to kill off molds that could be killed, and if the molds that survived became toxin formers where before they didn't. So before 1970, it usually was a building that was retrofitted or retrograde corrected or modern construction. The safest buildings, even though they're water damaged, are the old buildings with no paint.
Okay, so there's no specific form of building that's amenable per se to water damage and the intrusion of toxins in consequence. But you talk about buildings after 1970. You said your first hypothesis was these buildings, these hypersealed buildings. But you said that your further investigations revealed some sealants that had antifungal embedded in them. Now, hypothetically, the reason they put those antifungals and anti-mold chemicals in the paints was to keep the fungus and mold down. But you said, or you're implying, I think you said directly, that the consequence of that, the unintended consequence of that, was that we produced molds and other toxins that were more toxic rather than less as a consequence of natural selection. So why did natural selection, which was obviously selecting molds and other biohazards that could tolerate the exposure to this poison, why did they become more toxic? And what's your evidence for that?
Fungi also had response to environmental hazards, and the environmental hazards of being killed will cause normal activation of genes in fungal species, such that they'll make toxins where beforehand they didn't. Well, the main role of a mycotoxin, for example, has nothing to do with defense. It has everything to do with predation. So the fungus wants to be eating a plant, and the plant doesn't want to be eaten, so it'll release things like a peroxidase, and the fungi make compounds to eliminate the fungi. They eliminate the peroxidase, therefore eliminate the plant defenses. But it's predation of fungi on its prey that's foremost before all this goes on. Meanwhile, actinobacteria love an alkaline environment. Molds like an acid environment, and the alkaline environment from actinode is created by manufacture of substances that will kill off fungi and change the pH of the drywall. So that as you see an initial building, the initial colonization will be with fungi, but it'll be replaced by actinobacteria as time goes on. But meanwhile, if there's a flood or a hurricane event or a natural disaster, the water saturation, or AW as the people should say, activity of water, will initially let in organisms that like very saturated conditions, or AW of 0.9 to its maximum of 1.0 or 100%. So we see one group of fungi of water damage that's acute, one different species will be grouping of water damage that's less acute, and in the end, then we'll see sources that have very dry buildings, with where the moisture has changed the ecosystem.
Yo, hi, Claire.
Actinobacteria are famous for creating smell. And interestingly, the musty smell or musty odor we've long associated with fungal colonization is coming from actinos.
Geosmin. There are also architectural design features that make a building more likely to become water damaged than others. Flat roofs are more likely to leak than pitched roofs are. Basements and crawl spaces are more likely to have water
mold
than you would see in homes that are built on a slab.
They're saying that buildings that have antifungal paint on them produce a different kind of mold. So he was saying that the older type buildings that don't have paint on them don't have as bad a mold problem. And mold makes people sick with like inflammation, brain fog. But I heard the other day that hydrogen peroxide is good for mold. Hydrogen peroxide is supposed to kill off the mold. And he said that drywall is affected more easily. That sucks for me, because what I'm living in, a trailer house, that's exactly what they're talking about, that little drywall stuff. And they're in houses too, like wood houses, brick homes. It could have drywall still in it. But apparently it's even on them old houses, like with the stones over there in Europe. But I don't know. So you have to rip down the drywall and put new drywall? That sucks. How much money would that be? Could you imagine ripping down all the walls in your house and replacing them? Yo, what up, Darnell? What up, Claire? They're talking about mold on the Jordan Peterson podcast, and he's talking to a doctor about it, and it gets worse. He said that 80% of homes are fostering chronic illness. He's saying that 80% of the homes have mold in them, which is bad news. It's mostly the drywall. So like this drywall right here, this wall, and it's got like chalk in it that looks like powder, like talc, that's the stuff that's gets mold in it a lot faster maybe. But it's coming from the roof. I don't know, like the sides. I was looking at the gutter the other day. The gutter, like, it gets full. It's not even, and it like fills up in the middle, and then it's overflowing in the middle. And I'm like, what is the point of a gutter? Like, shouldn't it just run off a little bit? I mean, I know that would be more dangerous, like, if you're on the roof. But all that water just collecting in the gutter and then just like spilling off into the sides is not good. But man, what can you do? You know, you could spray hydrogen peroxide. How do you spray that inside the wall? You can't. You have to rip out the wall. I mean, that's I don't know. Okay, so how long have humans been doing this? Humans been doing this a long time, but not long enough, because we would probably like develop some kind of immune system to mold, maybe. I don't know. But I mean, when it comes to money, it's gonna suck trying to stay healthy because you gotta spend money just to replace your walls. I mean, maybe roofs. Maybe there should be regulations on roofs to make them stronger so they don't leak. I don't know. I ain't no politician, but that sounds like a plausible idea to me. We got black mold. The water heater broke. The washing machine broke. Your sink broke. And the walls could be leaking from the inside out. Fuck. And it's a shame to think of those houses, those trailer houses that people are renting in like Florida, and they're really expensive, and they're old, and they probably have mold in them, like in Cali. I mean, this trailer is only 20 years old, but it probably might have mold, because I can smell it after it rains. And he was just talking about that smell after you can smell a certain particular type of mold, because I can smell it after it rains. I don't know if it's the rain or if it's the mold I'm smelling, but it's like, how the fuck do you spray that? It's behind the wall. And you can't just get on your roof and start spraying hydrogen peroxide like it's gonna leak in through the... You're gonna spray it on the outside and hope that it goes on the inside. That ain't gonna work, homie. You gotta fucking tear down the walls just to fix them. Seriously? So, I don't know. There should be something on the walls where it's easy to take it apart. So you could just replace a part of the drywall. I mean, when are they gonna stop using drywall? I don't know when they started, but it seems like it's pretty lightweight. Maybe they could mix something else with it. Then we might have another problem, because then another cyanobacteria is going to mutate, or whatever he's talking about.
Drywall is more likely to have problems than plaster on laid. And so there are a number of different materials and architectural styles that can make a house or a commercial building more vulnerable or less vulnerable.
Right, well, you could imagine, when I'm thinking my paranoid thoughts, I know, here's an example. So one of the reasons that the Roman Empire fell was because the Romans used lead to seal their wine amphora. And lead is a known neurotoxin. And when we introduced lead into gasoline to stop the gas from our internal combustion engines from knocking, we lowered the IQ of people around the world by a substantial amount. It was really quite a catastrophe.
Oh, no.
It was also the case that in relatively low, let's see, in older houses that had used a plethora of lead paint, where the paint was allowed to deteriorate, and young children were therefore ingesting lead paint powder, they were also impaired in terms of their intelligence and also much more likely to be antisocial and criminal. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's possible for a society to introduce something into their midst that's then distributed in an extraordinarily widespread fashion. Experimental vaccines come to mind, by the way, and all of a sudden all sorts of things that weren't understood about that thing that's being introduced make themselves manifest. And it sounds like that's a case that you're making for drywall, is that it's an extraordinarily light, easy to work with, cheap building substance, but it isn't. We don't have a lot of historical experience with it. It was introduced in a very widespread manner in the latter half of the 20th century. And then you're saying that in combination with the fungicides and so forth that was put in the paint, that we put ourselves in a situation where we've contaminated something approximating 50 to 80% of buildings. So that's really quite the bloody catastrophe. So now let's take that apart a little bit. If it's 50 to 80% of buildings, how many of them, in your estimation, are contaminated to the point where that actually constitutes a serious health problem? I know that that's a threshold issue, but there's lots of threats that people have to contend with, obviously. And if your house is contaminated with mold and water damage, that's a big deal. It's a really difficult thing to fix, or it can be. And so, under what conditions should people be prioritizing this as a actionable risk factor, and how widespread do you think this problem is in its more serious forms?
He said it can make people antisocial and criminal.
At individual susceptibility, which underlies autism.
What the fuck?
Individual susceptibility of the immune response genes found in chromosome 6, or HLA-DR, was shown to be present in just about every person who had SIRS, and the percentage of not having SIRS HLA but having an illness is less than 5% of the total. So 95% were broken out into 6 separate haplotypes. There are 54 available, and out of those 6, it's 24% of the population. When we look at this 24%, if we put them into exposure and follow them prospectively, we can show.
Yeah, one of my first labs, I was outside.
Once a priming event has taken place, is essentially 100% of those with individual susceptibility. We're seeing this exactly the same way with COVID. COVID creates an inflammatory response.
Yeah, this is crazy. This mold is creating mental illness.
So long COVID has the same genetic makeup, and we've published a paper on this in June of last year as well, that it creates a new illness, a new target where once wasn't before. And we looked at people who were living in a building and fine, got COVID, got better from COVID, but then that turned on the innate immune response system that didn't stop, and lo and behold, a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, they had long COVID syndrome, when actually what they had was a chronic inflammatory initiator. It could be a horde of yellow jackets stinging people at a picnic, creating an inflammatory response, or it could be an illness. In this case, COVID fills the bill.
Okay, so you can imagine that there's a manner of conceptualization that allows for 2 kinds of disease processes. There's disease processes that are associated with pathogens per se, and then there are disease processes associated with an anti-disease response or an immunological response gone astray. So if I'm following you correctly, we have a situation where, let's say, 75% of our buildings are contaminated. And so 3/4 of the population is exposed to the pathogens that could produce an immune hyper-response. But 25% of the population in those buildings is particularly susceptible to that because they have a genetic predisposition to immune overreaction in response to the specific kinds of pathogens we're describing? Or is that a more general susceptibility to immune overreaction? You seem to be implying that in relationship to the COVID issue. So it's 25% of 75%, essentially, is the number of people who are hypothetically affected. So that's about 25%. That's about 20% of people, all things considered, might be experiencing this as a serious problem. So have I got that? Have I got all that right?
Yeah.
Toxoplasmosis. I heard that too, like, cats can make people schizophrenic or something. I didn't know that. Yeah, basically he was saying this mold can create mental illness, depression, brain fog. Something else. There was a famous woman actress that died with mold poisoning. She was in that 8th Mile movie with Eminem. She was blonde-headed, dirty blonde looking girl. And I think she had mold in her house. I thought that's what it was. Man, this mold's scary. Cats is an easy problem. You just let the cats be outside. But damn. Can't even spend a lot of time inside no more. You scared you got mold. So, hydrogen peroxide. I thought you just used bleach. Shit. What I did as a little kid don't sound too bad, huh? You gotta start ripping down your drywall. What the fuck? No. You're gonna have to remodel your own house? What the? Can we just like insert or like do like an x-ray or something of the wall to like check to see how much if there's mold in there? Is there like some kind of thing that you could just like stick in the wall right there or like scan it so you could see how much mold, cyanobacteria, whatever it's called? You had cat scratch fever, never went to the disease specialist. Mom didn't found out she had it, so that's likely what I had. You had the same symptoms, but yours was worse because not as long though. But that's what you had and didn't need to go to the specialist. You just have to wait for that to run its course. But if you got brain fog and inflammation, because I had rheumatoid arthritis flare up one time, and that shit hurt so bad it felt like something was eating at my hips and my knees. And I thought it was from mold in the coffee, but if you got inflammation living in a house and brain fog, it might be because of mold. I'm just saying. It might not be because of white potatoes or or it's about to rain. It's kind of similar to rabies virus. Immunological diseases are weird. It's weird because I researched rheumatoid arthritis flare up, and it was saying that one answer would be because your body is attacking, it's an immunoresponse attacking itself. But I'm like, why in the fuck is it attacking my knees and my hips and not anywhere else? And like, it started in my foot. I felt it in my foot. My foot started tingling real bad before my hips and my knees started hurting. And I felt like something went in my system, and it went down because your blood gets pumped down and then it gets sucked back up. And it was in my feet, and that was hell. Luckily, I had a little tablet of turmeric. I took some turmeric with it, and I prayed, but it stopped hurting after like 2 hours. And then I was sore for like 2 days. Yeah, chronic fatigue syndrome. That could be what's affecting you if you have mold too. It makes you tired, I guess. Be sitting inside, tired inside. Then you don't start feeling better till you're outside for like a long time. Man, that sucks. There's a possibility I might have to rip down my walls. And if I don't, I could stay sick. So it's kind of weird if it's raining from the sides. I mean, if the mold is coming in on the sides and coming down, if you're like through the walls. But I know 3 or 4 places done broke. So the water was making the lights flicker the other day because there was I think there's a leak where the porch is. You know how you put a porch up? Because the water was coming down on the light switch and it was smoking. Or it was a wire loose, because I found out it was water because when the plug got put back in, like the light switch, like it was hanging out a little bit, and I pushed it and water came out. Some water came out when I pushed it. So there definitely was water behind the wall. which is not good. Because I was trying to spray some bleach in there, but it was hard to get the bleach bottle to spray, so I was like, fuck it. Oh yeah, like arthritis, gonococcal arthritis. Yo, what's up, Lois Lane? Yeah, when they tested me for chlamydia, it's gonorrhea with it. So they treat both of it like they're both the same. But I don't know how you treat mold sickness. Like if you stay in the house and it's mold problems, you're just gonna get it over and over again. There's many other types of bacteria that cause mental retardation and people carry silently. What? Yeah, Lois Lane, I'm okay. I just hurt my toe yesterday. I probably broke it. And then I just was listening to Dr. Peterson talk to this doctor about mold. And they're saying that 80% of the houses have mold because of this drywall. It's worse when they paint it. So that ain't good news. So people might be like having problems because they have mold. And it's like, it's a big problem that nobody seems to be talking about. Yeah, so many people could have problems and like they don't even know because it stays dormant for a while. Or something will trigger it, like a mold. Like you get some moldy coffee, because that's what I thought was starting my rheumatoid arthritis flare up. I thought it was the moldy coffee. Yeah, I don't know if I was in the zone or not and just didn't realize it. Sometimes I think that's what trips me out about reality. Oh, so your doctor could like test you to see if you have mold sickness? Yeah, you're probably right. I didn't know that. I think that's what he was saying. It's a bacteria first that comes in with the water, and it mutates. It mutates into a mold. Maybe they can put something that'll eat the mold, like how there's like, you know how people make sauerkraut? They have to use sea salt for it to grow, and it's bacteria. But I don't know. Cyanobacteria sounds, yeah, more like bacteria than the mold. Maybe Jordan was confused. There are cyanofungus too. There's cyanofungus? I don't know. Sometimes I get lost. Sometimes I get lost trying to understand Jordan Peterson. He uses a lot of big words that I don't know what they are. Jordan Peterson makes me want to look in a dictionary. I already had to open up the encyclopedia because I was wondering what the hell was all this nuance. People kept saying nuance, and I was like, what the hell is this word? Let me look it up. And it just means slightly different. That's all it means. Nuance just means slightly different. Slightly different. And I was like, why do they keep saying this? No, what's nuanced about your house could be mold. It's the cold hard truth. Did I speak a different language before? No. Yes. Yes, I used to speak Spanish when I was like 3 years old. When I was 3, I was speaking Spanish, and then started speaking English when I was 4. Yeah, I don't like using big words. Well, I was learning a lot of big words, and then I tried not to learn a lot of big words because people in the country don't know a lot of big words. And they started calling me smart. So I used to use big words, and I started sounding smart. You have herpes and a fungus and bacteria bred with it, and you had to do a little engineering a long time ago and some of off-label mixing of medications to cure yourself out of you told the doctor you was going to do. Damn. Yo, Lois Lane, I'm in America, man. I'm in the South. Darnell Dodge, some off-label mixing of the pharmaceuticals he prescribed, which really isn't legal. Labels. Damn. Yeah, I think I was saying something about that. Like, they was saying that you can't cure herpes, but there was some people talking about you can cure it. I wonder if there's anything we can breathe in, like, that'll get the mold sickness out. Probably not. Yeah, some people prefer using small words so they don't get confused. And then it just takes up more energy. It takes up more energy because then you might have to explain what it is. So you did, Darnell, you did that and it did break the cycle. You did a natural remedy or a holistic remedy. Because this dude yesterday on the Jack Morgan show, he was saying that he had some kind of problem with his thyroid, and he went to South America to do ayahuasca to cure his thyroid problem, and he said it cured it, but it made him sound like he was having a lot of paranoia. Besides what's on the mold and the STDs, how is life going? Life is good. You just realize that, the clock is ticking. Time is running out. So much you want to do. You see people make a lot of money, but they don't have much of a life. And they make a lot of money like in a short period of time, and it looks good. It's a sacrifice. It didn't cure the herpes, but it broke the cycle of them being mixed. Yes, a combo, and it cleared up. It cleared it up. Wow. Virus, fungus, bacteria is not fun. And your research is still incomplete. Ooh. God damn. Nature trying to kill us. That's why you always try to do as much as you can before you pass, because you only live once. Exactly. Exactly. And I've been kind of down for a while because there was a lot of things that I was supposed to do that I never did. And there's lots more that I wanted to do that I didn't do. And I feel like it's hard to do those things and have a job at the same time, unless you have a lot of vacation days and you just, I don't know, man. You don't have a job, you don't have any money. How are you supposed to have fun? And then you do have a job, you have a lot of money, and then you don't have time to have fun. You fuck around and try to have fun and you have a job, you might lose your job. It's crazy. It's like, if you don't choose to have fun, then you're never gonna have fun. Like, having fun is a sacrifice within itself. And then the stuff that you gotta do is the same thing. I think I think a man being single is incomplete. I think a single man is incomplete, and like, even friends, like, that's what friends are for. You ask for help from a friend and they help you out, but you gotta ask. And it's just like, there's you grow up and you can't just walk to your friend's house no more, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I need help to do stuff. It's not that serious, you know? Like, I can wipe my own ass and all this shit, but sometimes I need some help to do some stuff, because I just don't want to do it by myself. Like, I'm weird. I'm weird. I think it's because my mama used to help me so much. My mama used to help me with everything. She would be setting me up with appointments and all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah, you grow up and realize you're not a kid anymore. They said you was a genius in school, but compared to who? If only you had access to a lab and free reign of materials and equipment. Yeah, I know. They have a new sexually transmitted ringworm variety in the States now. What the fuck? Hell no. Oh my god. No. That's why you always try to do as much as you can before you pass. Yeah, you only live once. Ugh. Hey, yeah, what you doing? Having sex in the dirt? We out there in the woods having sex in the dirt, baby. We got a ringworm. Yep, there comes a point in time where you realize you're not a kid anymore and you need to do your stuff. Like, you need to listen to your parents' advice. Because they told you some stuff, but you just ain't doing it. You didn't want to be held down by the pressure of being a sophomore in college as a 5th grader. Plus, you was mad at the school and didn't want them to get that genius finder's fee. Damn, that's crazy. We're sorry and hope that I have a great night. God bless me. Thanks, Lois. I hope you have a blessed night, too. After the abuse they put you through for being smarter than them. Yeah, that's crazy. Like, you gotta keep your intelligence a secret. They're gonna use you for some kind of project. You're gonna go to college and be used like a guinea pig.
you do, and you picked it up very quickly. I thank you for that. One of the reasons that it's so important is that we look at illnesses that are SIRS, that actually are SIRS, and add up who has chronic fatigue syndrome, who has fibromyalgia, who has depression, who's just getting older because their cognitive dysfunction.
Right.
What? That's where fibromyalgia
Not doing
comes
well in
from?
school. Is it the lead paint that they swallowed? Is it the lead in the applesauce that they've been taking in?
In the
Are the
applesauce.
environmental factors that are creating this overall systemic illness of which the brain is the injury I worry
Yeah, they're
most
gonna put
about
you to
in
work for a
adults.
big company.
Scott sees children more than I did, so we can let him speak about children with cognitive issues. But the issues are that when we look carefully at chronic fatigue syndrome, we find SIRS. And I'd like you, sir, if you could, to identify one significant biomarker that distinguishes fibromyalgia from not.
Oh, that's from
We have
that's
30
asbestos?
biomarkers for SIRS
Damn.
and 0 for fibromyalgia. Why does fibromyalgia have such a preponderance of people? And how many people, adults, have fibromyalgia? 10%? Add 3% for chronic fatigue syndrome. How about post-Lyme syndrome? How about depression? Boy, we've got 25% all of a sudden. And when we start looking at those details, we can stratify sick versus non-sick, cases versus controls, treat them, and show that cases equal to controls, and they become controls after treatment has occurred.
Okay, so one of the things that the non-medical listeners and watchers of this podcast might not know is that there's a lot of overlap in symptoms between hypothetically different illnesses. And so let's take depression as a case in point. And when I was testing my clients for depression, the first thing I always tried to figure out was, are they just ill? Because there's all sorts of evidence associating depression, particularly with immunological dysfunction. And so I would inquire into their sleep habits and their eating habits and also their associated health conditions to find out if we could, because my sense was before we diagnose something as psychological, we should take a look and see if there's actually something causing it. And depression is a relatively non-specific cluster of syndromes. Now you're pointing to a whole set of syndromes that have relatively non-specific symptoms, some of them even more difficult to diagnose and easier to be skeptical about in relationship even to their existence as, say, fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, right? That's hard to dissociate from general depression and anxiety and a kind of global neuroticism or even a hypochondriasis. Now you're saying, your first claim is that 20% of the population is likely to be experiencing these symptoms, but we don't see we don't see this SIRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome, in 20% of people because essentially we're placing them in the wrong bins. Now, and so let's walk through what the symptom constellation is for chronic inflammatory response syndrome, that's SIRS, and how you think we should go about distinguishing that from, say, fibromyalgia, which is poorly understood, or chronic fatigue syndrome, which is poorly understood, or depression. And why do you think that your category system, which places all the people in the box of chronic inflammatory response syndrome, why do you think that that's preferable to the approach that's being used by physicians now? Because, you're making a lot of radical claims here, and I'm certainly not in a position to dispute them, but you know what they say, radical claims require radical evidence. And you're saying, well, first of all, that 80% of our buildings are in serious trouble, that 20% of the population is suffering dreadfully as a consequence, and that there are genetic predispositions to this, and that many, many people with many other disorders are fundamentally misdiagnosed, and that this is actually the root cause of their symptoms, like including absolutely devastating diseases like Alzheimer's. So what is it? Let's go through. First of all, what are the symptoms
Even
that
Alzheimer's
point to SIRS as far as you're concerned? And then what do you use to prove that that's the condition?
As Dr. Shoemaker said, we have roughly 30 biomarkers. These are tests.
Yeah, that auto type
distinguish
is annoying. It messes me up a lot.
What we call cases from healthy people, what we call controls. We have roughly 30 of them, and all of them have been validated to show that they separate cases from controls. When we look at the diagnosis of SIRS, you have to have objective evidence that shows that you have several of these biomarkers. I mean, at least 4 or maybe 5 or more before you can actually even make the diagnosis. The statistical likelihood of finding a healthy person who had 5 abnormal biomarkers out of the 5 we draw or the 10 that we obtain, it is so small. I mean, it's in the 1 to a million. Then when you start looking at a larger group of people, maybe several people in the same home or in the same office building or in the same school, when you start looking at that and each person's probability of having those abnormal biomarkers multiplies by the next person's and then multiplies by the next person's. By the time you get to 10 people, you have such astronomically low probability that this is a freak accident that it can't be dismissed. I think what the main problem is and why this hasn't been seen before in chronic fatigue patients or irritable bowel patients or fibromyalgia patients is because most physicians or many physicians don't run the tests that we do. We are looking specifically at the innate immune system as a possible root cause for these different symptoms. And if they ran the tests that we do, they would see the same kind of data that we have. My data is very similar to Dr. Shoemaker's. I've seen roughly 2,000 patients, 2,000 that I've evaluated this. For him, it's much more because he's been doing it much longer than I have. And our data is very similar.
Okay, so your argument basically is, and I just want to walk through this very carefully so that everyone listening understands, is that you've identified a number of biomarkers. You said 30 overall, but apparently you concentrate on something like 5 to 10. Now, there's a probability that any given test is going to produce a result that's positive falsely. So someone will be diagnosed as abnormal on that evaluated dimension, in truth not be abnormal, but that probability declines as a function of the number of tests administered. So maybe there's a 1 in 20 chance that any given test will show that you have the condition, but there's a 1 in 400 chance that 2 tests would show that, and a 1 in 8,000 chance that 3 tests would show that. And so your case basically is that as you accumulate evidence of the biomarkers, you decrease the probability of a false diagnosis. And there aren't biomarkers, as far as I know, there certainly aren't biomarkers for depression. So that's not specific, what would you say, physical or chemical biomarkers. You know, there's elevated cortisol or decreased cortisol, but the markers are very non-specific. So if you're correct and there are specific biomarkers for SIRS, that implies that it can be more accurately diagnosed than the other conditions with which it might be confused. And so what are the prime biomarkers that you guys use to make the diagnosis? And why did you pick those, and how valid do you think they are, and why?
We need to start with a case definition. The case definition in 2003 that our group came up with was modified in 2008 by the U.S. Government Accountability Office. When they looked at the potential for exposure, this is what CDC used with Fisteria back in 1996. You didn't get sick from a algal bloom unless you're exposed to it. So the potential for exposure is number 1. Number 2 is symptoms the same or similar to those seen in published peer-reviewed literature. The third element is laboratory findings the same or similar to those seen in published literature. And then the fourth is objective response of biomarkers to treatment. So if we then say, what biomarkers have stood the test of time? Back in 2000, it was trial and error. By finding HLA was the explanation of why did some people get sick and other people didn't. Was there a risk factor like cigarette smoking or alcohol use or age or underlying illness with diabetes? No. It was based on genetic markers. So individual immune responses became our first biomarker. Actually, the first biomarker came from the EPA with Ken Hundell and studying the neurotoxicology features of visual contrast sensitivity, which is a mechanism to see an abnormal neurologic function of vision. Contrast is one that's been stabilized over time and is adversely affected as velocity of flow of red cells and
What the
neural
fuck?
ganglionic nerve head increases. So VCS was our first, HLA was our next. In that group, there was a regulatory neuropeptide, melanocyte stimulating hormone, which is essentially
wild.
negative in all cases and normal in all controls. And then with treatment, we saw improvement in MSH, not as much as what we wanted, and that was the impetus to keep on. Scott mentioned cytokines. In 1986, 1985 was the first publication of a paper on cytokines. And here we are in 1996 postulating that this cytokine effect could be huge. And now if we fast forward to COVID, it's a cytokine storm, and everyone in the drugstore knows what a cytokine storm is. They're buying COVID tests. They're looking for mechanisms that we have been studying, and cytokine storms are part of the innate immune response, so you'll have it in COVID, but you have it in SIRS too. And COVID doesn't have the same HLA that we know of yet, but we'll probably find it doesn't have the same VCS. And it's a sorting process. So we took then inflammatory markers, TGF-beta1, no lab was running that, so I hired a lab to prove that there was such a marker, and then we showed it with the abnormal, and showed it in its height with some of the worst illnesses of all. And then we treated it with medications that were available over the counter or with informed consent. And then every time we had re-exposure, here we came to the prospective acquisition of illness, proof of causation. We took people that could have been sick from one building, fixed them, all the lab biomarkers were the same, and then with informed consent, they stopped all medicines and stayed away to the suspect building. 3 days, nothing. Put them back in the building on day one. At the end of day one, laboratory findings changed. Day two, laboratory findings changed again. Day three, we had the exact syndrome of labs, BCS, and symptoms prospectively proven upon re-exposure only. No other choices could have affected. It wasn't depression in 3 days. It was SIRS in 3 days.
Okay, so let me elaborate on the story now. So the biomarkers that you described, the first one, which is a very odd one, I've taken this test, by the way, and failed it, and quite dramatically. And so there's an online test, which is a visual contrast sensitivity test. And basically what you're doing, and stop me if I get this wrong because it's been a while, is you're testing people's sensitivity to what visual acuity in relationship to closely spaced lines on a diagram, essentially. And the hypothesis that you're putting forward is that in the presence of these inflammatory syndromes, retinal acuity is compromised, and I don't understand the mechanism there, but that's basically the issue, right? So there is an online test, visual contrast sensitivity, that people can take. It's a strange test because it seems like it's so far removed from the symptom set that people would be experiencing. It's very difficult for someone like myself. I'm scientifically trained, and all of the stuff that I've encountered as a consequence, all of the findings I've encountered as a consequence of going through your material have really come as a shock to me. This visual contrast sensitivity test being one of them, because it's so far removed from the symptoms that it's hard to believe that there could be a relationship. It almost seems like voodoo. Now, you said that the reason that this visual contrast sensitivity test works is because the retina itself is compromised as a consequence of immunological malfunction. And so have I got that right?
We have a objective parameter, and that's velocity of flow of red blood cells in the retina blood vessels and the capillary beds, as well as the neural ganglionic nerve head. We can measure objectively with a Heidelberg retinal flow meter how fast red blood cells move. And they move more slowly if the inflammatory response promotes production of what are called adhesions, which is one mechanism to decrease flow in the area of hyperinflammation, and treatment will be shown to improve flow as the environmental stimulus is fixed and is corrected with treatment. So with sick patients, you have reduced flow. Healed patients have restored to normal flow to equal controls, but re-exposure, here we go, prospective exposure again. This is how we determine risk in all of medicine and science, prospectively, not an association. but prospectively re-expose people, get the same findings back again. We fix them, we get them back to the same mechanism they were when they were healed, to equal to controls. This in and out, and constant answers to the critics. How could this possibly be true? Well, here are the data. And if people want to argue with me, they can argue with my data.
Okay, so let me elaborate on that a little bit before I return to the biomarkers per se. So I know that the closest tissue that's deeply analogous to the brain itself is retinal tissue. And so I don't know if that's relevant in this regard, but it seems to me that if what you're measuring with the visual, what does it mean? You're with the visual acuity test, visual sensitivity, visual contrast sensitivity test, you're measuring retinal dysfunction. What are the implications of that measured retinal dysfunction for broader central nervous system dysfunction or brain dysfunction? And does that lead us logically into a discussion of degenerative neurological conditions like Alzheimer's?
It does. The same mechanism of cytokine response in capillary beds is the same, whether it started with a fungus, whether it started with actinobacteria, whether it started with the flu. But this innate immune response is non-specific in how it responds, but it will respond, and we can measure its tendency to recur regardless of where it happens. It'll happen in kidneys, it happens in lung, it happens in liver, and it happens in the neural rim of the optic nerve head, which is the first part of the central nervous system. We've added countless additions to that, but that was the beginning. That was 1998. After studying this for 1.5 years, we finally had our first biomarker that led the way to cytokines. We could separate with treatment. But by having treatment, we had the way around the skeptics, because I can say, all right, you use your voodoo medicine for a week, and I'll use my voodoo medicine for a week. We'll see whose voodoo works better. When yours doesn't and mine does, then I'm going to say I win the battle.
Right, well, that's particularly powerful, as you pointed out, in combination with evidence that you can reinstantiate the illness once treated with re-exposure. Because then you have direct causality, right, instead of the weak sort of correlations that often go to hypothetically prove the existence of a given condition. Okay, so let me get this straight again. So you have the vision test, you have HLA, maybe you can tell us again what that is. Melatonin stimulating hormone and cytokine detection. So that's four. Are those the four primary biomarkers?
Vision, we also saw, you mentioned cortisol in depression.
Yo, what up, Bobby Huff?
ACTH and cortisol.
Am I black? Yeah, I'm part black.
There was dysregulation of ACTH, which is made by the same set of environmental and metabolic pathways in the brain. They're all melanocortins. MSH and ACTH are melanocortins. So if we have disruption of MSH,
say the N word.
ACTH, and cortisol can either follow in step, which it often will.
Sorry about your
or
sickness.
Has created its own marker. So dysregulation of ACTH and cortisol is one. We found antidiuretic hormone doing the same thing. People walk around with chronic headaches. They said they had migraine constantly.
I'm just trying to help people get better.
They're all functionally dehydrated with elevated osmolality and reduced ADH. That was another measurement. We looked at pulmonary hypertension as a very common cardiac condition mistaken for cardiovascular disease. People are short of breath and have chest pain with exertion. We think that it's from doing a coronary disease, when in fact we measure the velocity of flow coming in, the force of the flow.
Damn, you was created from Japan.
That's reduced if the pulmonary pressure is increased. When we measure that, we find that over 60% of our
cases, Bobby Huff, don't beat around the bush. Don't dodge the question.
Do the echocardiogram to show it. And it is just one.
I'm also intersexy and mixed.
I hope we'll have time for today. If not, tomorrow or another day. The gene mechanisms are the real gold mine.
Darnell Dodge is funny. Me too, but they get mad at that.
Don't let me forget that if we don't get there. I want to. Okay, so we basically walked through.
She a transformer.
We've done a reasonable overview of the biomarker space. So let's do this now. Let's talk about behavioral and cognitive behavioral, emotional, and cognitive symptoms. Like what are people who have SIRS going to experience in their day-to-day life that they might confuse with chronic fatigue syndrome or depression or fibromyalgia, for example, or you said pulmonary hypertension
How do I
as
feel
well.
about Drake?
So what are the fundamental symptoms that people should be alert to, and do they
I don't
differ
listen
in
to
adults
Drake.
and children?
Well, as we were talking about decreased red blood
I think he
cell
makes a lot of
flow
money.
to the optic disc, you have to understand that there's decreased red blood flow to different places in the body, not just to the optic disc. So for instance, peripherally, as you look at the hands and feet, we'll see that there's reduced red cell flow there too. Our patients will often have cold hands or cold feet or both. They can have cramping in their hands. They can have pains in their hands, even sometimes discoloration, that looks like cyanosis. And we see that goes away with treatment. Dr. Shoemaker was talking about the lungs. We also need to talk about the brain. The brain will also
Kids
have
are the future,
decreased blood
dude.
flow. And Dr. Shoemaker actually demonstrated that in unpublished data back in the late 2000s when he was doing MR spectroscopy, and showed that there was an increase in lactic acid in certain areas of the brain, and there was an abnormality in the glutamate-glutamine ratio, both of which
I don't know, I
suggested that
just
there was
wanted to learn
hyperperfusion
something.
or a reduction
I just wanted
of
to
that
learn
red
something,
blood cell
Bobby.
flow. So why is that important? Well, the blood carries the oxygen and the sugar, the glucose, that's necessary for production of energy at a cellular level. If we chronically reduce the amount of oxygen that is getting to any cell, it will stop making energy as well, and then we get into genomics findings. But what we know is when you're not making enough energy, then you have to ration the energy that you have, and the cell will underperform in different areas. And so that will lead into brain fog and potentially into cellular death, which can then lead into things like diabetic regeneration and the neurologic illnesses.
Now, you also, how do you directly evaluate brain state and brain function? If I remember correctly, I mean, I've been investigating this with my daughter and my wife for some time, and some of the details are unclear to me. We've also had brain
The legal age of consent is at least 16.
Neurological damage that might be associated with this
you gotta have
exposure
permission
and sensitivity. And so,
from the parents, homie.
for everyone who's watching and listening, I mean, I might as well tell you why I'm particularly interested
Can't
in
go
this.
below 17. They gotta be 18.
History of
unless you got permission from the parents.
My suspicions are strong that it has a physiological basis because, first of all, it has a seasonal component, and that indicates something physiological right off the bat. But it's also associated with a lot of immunological trouble, which seemed to culminate in this case of my daughter, who had endless numbers of immunological problems. And
they got to be 18,
a lot of those successfully with a very restricted diet, as have my wife and I.
Above 16, got to have permission
more recently
from the parents.
The cause of the
clones were not successful. Semi-clones were better. It didn't double the genes and cause psychosis like
to sensitivity to these biotoxins that Dr. Shoemaker and McMahon are talking about. And so, well, that's what we're trying to track down at the moment, because this has been a multi-generational catastrophe in my family, and I would like to get to the bottom of it. And so we did some of these neurological tests that did indicate some neurological damage.
That's wild.
Hypothetically, as a consequence of toxin exposure. And so can you walk everybody through those tests and what they indicate, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about treatment before turning to genomics.
We skipped over symptoms. You asked a couple of
Yes, right. Yes,
let's pick up that loose end before we get into neurocon and all that. The symptom reporting that I did when I had visual contrast as my only biomarker was compulsive logging down of what symptoms do people have. The symptoms that I listed in an interview, it wasn't a self form or questionnaire the patient would fill out. It's the process of doing a medical history that we're all trained to do in 4 years of medical school or longer.
You still got to be cool with their parents.
Specifically, fatigue and weakness were non-specific.
I remember when I was 16, but it's not.
And cramping.
That's illegal. You got to be.
When you get spasms at nighttime, get a Charlie horse or in the
You got to be younger.
It's hard to extend fingers
when you're that young.
In spasm. basically that was the end of
Man, I had my driver's license. I was going picking up my girlfriend. You know what I'm saying? I was like 16. My girlfriend was 15.
Respiratory issues, cough, shortness of breath.
I remember when I was 13, my girlfriend was 12. You know what I'm saying? Like,
eye findings, we have red
once you
eye,
grow up, it
blurred
just ain't the
vision,
same no more.
hearing,
It's time to get with an older woman. So basically, I need to get with an older woman.
Shortness of breath and difficulty with exertion. We had lung involvement. Didn't have a lot of sputum production, and the biomarker was restrictive lung disease, not obstructive. It wasn't asthma. It was called asthma by some. It's not. It's restrictive. Abdominal pain, secretory diarrhea.
Yeah.
Vomiting, nausea, also
You gotta push through in life, dude.
Soreness, stiffness, first thing in the morning and throughout after sitting in a chair for 2 hours. The cognitive issues were there. Difficulty with memory, difficulty with assimilation of new knowledge, difficulty with concentration, difficulty with disorientation. The executive cognitive functions are 6. Hypothalamic system. We had change in appetite, change in weight suddenly, and that weight gain out of the blue, change in sweats and night sweats especially, change in temperature regulation. Those are all the MSH related things.
So let me ask you a technical question about that. So I mean, when you're going through that as a psychologist, so what I would think would be helpful in relationship to that diagnosis would be to make a list, like a questionnaire of all you listed off about 40 symptoms. I think that's about how many you covered. So you could imagine that you had people fill out a questionnaire, and then you could associate each questionnaire item with biomarkers, and you could find out which of the symptoms were cardinal with a factor analysis. Have you guys done any questionnaire development?
Yeah, sorry about that, Bobby.
Identification?
Yes, every person that
when I was in high school, one of my girlfriends, she had a boyfriend that was 28, and she was only 15.
If there's cluster analysis, a statistical function of saying yes or no based on visual contrast and symptoms alone without any of the other biomarkers.
Yeah.
Just statistically, we can tell you 98.5% likelihood of surge.
It's normal for 15-year-olds to be talking to older men.
It's incredible. No one believes
but
it until they
there's laws now. You gotta have permission from the parents.
Gone from 8 down to 6 down to 4. You're halfway there. We want you down to 1.
Like my mama, when she had me, she was 17.
Of the symptoms by
but
any chance?
My daddy had permission from the parents, like, you know, my mama.
Okay, all right.
My mama was ready to get out of the house.
Now there's about 40.
She wanted to get out of the house, mommy.
And we talked a little
my mama
bit
was
about
like,
illnesses that are hypothetically attributable to that, but let's go through that in some more detail. What common illnesses?
Yo, what up, Lois Lane?
I don't remember if it's you guys or not, but I read a paper here recently while I was doing background research that showed that there's a much higher risk than in most countries in Finland for the development of Alzheimer's, and that was associated in this paper with a particularity of, if I remember correctly, a Finnish architectural design that made their houses more susceptible to these biotoxins that you described, and that's produced a statistically significant increase in the rate of Alzheimer's in Finland. Was that your work?
No, I'm familiar with that work. All I wanted the Finnish people to show is that treatment will correct the abnormalities and then create...
What the hell? They got cancer?
Correct the Alzheimer's. By the time it gets to the Alzheimer's, we're 20 years late. We can pick up the difficulties of tubulin A4A and TUBB1 in ALS.
Yeah, Bobby. Yeah, Bobby.
Very young ages.
My mama was young as fuck, dude. Back when I was a teenager, man, when I was younger, dude,
we think it's old age.
I was
Her
cool.
problems got started when she was 30 and 40.
Right.
Recognizable then and all the other. Scott, I've been talking too much. Your turn.
Have you guys ever tried a verbal fluency test by any chance?
That's crazy, Darnell.
Because verbal fluency
Mitochondrial aging and oxidation.
Well, there's certain forms of neurological degeneration that interfere with verbal fluency quite dramatically. And it might be a good marker for cognitive interference.
Sorry, technical problems, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't know anything about the human growth hormones and accelerated aging.
Verbal processing was one of the panel they had. It was published in the Lancet in 1998. We're worth taking a look at. I don't have your skills, but she did, and those abnormalities were found.
When you do neuropsychological testing of patients, the two most common
I think you could have
abnormalities
did
that I
like
see are deficits in working memory.
I don't know how to do that.
Deficits in
The
processing speed
cancer.
overall. And one of the complaints that we very commonly see is that people are still able to do the functions of their job. It just takes them much longer than it used to. So what they used to be able to wrap up in an hour now, 3 or 4 hours, which
Right.
relatively unproductive, and eventually they end up on disability.
See, that's why verbal fluency might be a real useful marker, because it's a time test, right? How many words can you write down that begin with the letter S in 3 minutes? And so it's because it's a speeded test, it might exactly pinpoint that interference with ongoing processing, say, rather than long-term memory or crystallized intelligence. So that's really why it's spraying.
That's
Well, that's
sad.
why it's spraying to mind. It's also an unbelievably easy test to administer, and there's wide individual variability, and it'd be very interesting to see if that was associated with the genomic markers that you described, and maybe we could turn to those now. And then I want to delve a bit more into, you know, we brushed over this very quickly, the idea that the symptoms that culminate in Alzheimer's decades later can be detected decades previously. I know, for example, by the way, this is another reason the verbal fluency test popped into mind. I know there was a study of nuns. They looked at their writing samples from when they were in their 20s, and they could tell by an analysis of verbal fluency which nuns were most likely to develop Alzheimer's in old age. It's the longest longitudinal study. Yeah, exactly. So another reason verbal fluency might be an interesting marker. So, okay, now, so I wanted to go in 2 directions. One direction was, okay, yeah, what is the panoply of degenerative neurological conditions that you think are likely to be associated with SIRS?
We didn't have a assumption-based discussion about symptoms and neurological abnormalities that we thought were for SIRS. We had recorded executive cognitive function, we recorded tremors, we recorded metallic taste, dizziness, vertigo, tremors, but we didn't have any way of assessing what was going on with the brain. We couldn't measure abnormalities in the brain. And along in 2007 comes NeuroQuant. And NeuroQuant, with one MRI image, can look at 11 different volumes that we then could start to correlate with parameters. And by 2015, Scott and I had both published papers looking at that there were reproducible abnormalities in NeuroQuant in SIRS patients, and with treatment we can fix those. But the beauty of 2017 was we could actually fix multi-nuclear atrophy. So our treatment was non-specific, non-degenerative, but instead of just fixing the hippocampus, we were fixing hippocampus, amygdala, and caudate. We were fixing pallor. We were fixing the mean number of abnormalities was 3.4 out of 6, and we could fix those to equal to controls, to 0.9 abnormalities, cases equal to controls. So NeuroQuant early on became of interest, but the final change was NeuroQuant associated with genomics.
And before we go there, I should just mention that there's a pattern of damage that we see in the brains of people that have chronic inflammatory response syndrome. In fact, there's more than one. If you develop your chronic inflammatory response syndrome as a result of water damage buildings, we tend to see that the forebrain parenchyma will be swollen. We see that, or enlarged, I should say.
What?
We'll see that the cortical gray matter will be enlarged, and that the caudate nucleus will be atrophic, will be smaller. If you develop chronic inflammatory response syndrome as a result of Lyme disease and post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome, we see a completely different pattern. And that pattern is that the right thalamus is enlarged and that the putamen is smaller and atrophic. And we showed that on 2 different studies. And then in the 3rd study that Dr. Shoemaker and I published together, looked at different
The aging
treatment.
couldn't be stopped.
And when we used Dr. Shoemaker's treatment protocol up to the next to the last step,
Clones.
we saw that the forebrain parenchyma that had previously been enlarged and the cortical gray that had previously been enlarged came back to control values. but we didn't see improvement in the
high human growth hormone,
multinuclear atrophy. The next
HGH.
paper, though, did, and that was with use of VIP, vasoactive intestinal polypeptide, which is a substance that your body makes and is key for, it's an anti-inflammatory peptide. It's a neuroregulatory peptide that
Psychological
brings your
drugs or
activated
psychedelics?
immune system back down to normal when it's appropriate to do that. And so with VIP therapy, which Dr. Shoemaker pioneered, we have seen caudate nucleus and multinuclear atrophy either stopping or reverting back toward normal.
Have you guys used that same treatment protocol for conditions like Alzheimer's or other degenerative neurological diseases? Obviously, there's an overlap there, which we've discussed, or hypothetically, there's overlap there with SIRS. Has anybody been looking at the application of this particular treatment protocol to these degenerative neurological diseases?
Yes, we published one study just a few weeks ago. But what we didn't have was looking at people that were untreated or stage 1 patients compared to stage 2, which is treated with the first part of the protocol, stage 3, treated with VIP, with stage 4. That's where we had the off VIP and doing well. We had a reduction of the basic mechanism of dieback CNS degeneration, looking at changes in TUBA4A, 44% reduction in 3 months.
Oh no, they cause
That's not
advanced
published yet,
aging.
but it's high on our list, but
Yeah, I bet it's high on your list. Yeah.
it's like we've got to get going on this one. There are other things that other people are doing. We're aware this is a complex field, and no one illness parameter will fit everybody. But if you've got the microtubular dysfunction that we had alluded to with TUBA4A and TUBB1, you have that as a marker, and you have cognitive issues, and you respond to VIP, the reduction is 44%. That's just in 3 months of work.
Okay, so I would like to take this in two directions now, and we've got about half an hour left in this segment, although we can run a little longer if
Cardboard and
that's
plaster,
I
baby.
want to know.
Better get ready. Get some paint.
What people should do. What constitutes treatment, and so that would be building testing, building remediation, and then the interventions that you described. But I would also like to talk about, I know, Dr. Shoemaker, that you and Dr. McMahon have brought this problem to the attention of government officials, and I believe particularly in relationship to military housing, but not only that. So let's start with everybody who's listening to this is going to be thinking, well, I know people who have this cluster of symptoms, what in the world should I do about it? So let's talk, we had our houses mold tested, and the results were rather dismal, and I'm not exactly sure what to do about that, because I have properties now that appear to be quite mold saturated, and the step after that's not
crazy,
exactly
Darnell.
clear. One of them was just remodeled, and I'm not that inclined to bloody well do the whole thing again, but that's partly why I'm investigating this to the degree that I am. But what is it? What are the steps?
I heard that they used CRISPR to make some babies in Asia, and they was
and then in order to do
they was
something about
immune to a certain kind of cancer.
Need to make sure the patient satisfies.
But they was using CRISPR to make these babies so they don't get cancer when they grow up.
This doesn't apply.
Yeah, people was freaked out about it, like you're not supposed to mess with genetics.
The ecological parameters within the building. If the building is water damaged and it should have fungi, but doesn't, and you don't test for actinobacteria,
your virus eats cancer. What
but
the
if you don't
fuck?
have fungi, is
It's
that because
crazy.
you never had them? Or is it because it's overrun with actinobacteria that are making the drywall surface alkaline and fungi don't live very well? And then if that's not the case, what about the water saturation with endotoxins? Because of the three things that cause the greatest amount of damage to the brain, endotoxins lead the list. Specifically for every abnormality that we find in a gene that shows us about specific causation. That's the building contractor's word. Specific causation for endotoxins we've identified in NeuroQuant, we've also identified in combination with the gene testing or genomic testing. So the two go
And
together.
acceleration of
But
aging.
then we want to know, do you have endotoxins? Do you have actinobacteria? Do you have fungi? And you can do that on one dust sample collected at home by someone who can put a glove on one hand and wipe the Swiffer cloth in one direction over 10 to 30 surfaces that are horizontal above the floor, and send that off to a lab that's reputable, that's licensed, it's not a fly-by-night insurance organization. But there are those that are out there, they really are. But specifically, if we've got a reputable lab that shows us the abnormalities, you've defined the illness parameters, you divide the environmental parameters, now we define the treatment.
Do you want to go for a treatment, Scott?
Sure. First part of treatment is taking care of the exposures. So if you're living in a home that's water damaged, or if it's your workplace, or maybe school that you're attending, you need to either fix that, remediate that, or relieve that. The most important step of any kind of treatment for any kind of immunologic illness is getting away from exposure. That is the most important step. It's probably the most difficult step for many people also.
Right.
It's expensive and it's mind-bending, and as there is a certain variation in knowledge of this illness amongst physicians, there is also a variation in knowledge of this illness amongst mold testers and mold remediators too. So you want to make sure that you are working with somebody that has stood the test of time and actually knows, to some degree about this illness. But that is the most important step. The second step that we initiate for almost all patients is the use of a binder. There are different kinds of binders.
That's not good.
Shoemaker pioneered the use of cholestyramine and cholestyramine, also known as Welchol. They are very effective, and typically we will see improvements within 2 to 3 months if you can get that first step taken care of.
It looks like that happens with a lot of Asians.
We'll use other, what I would consider less effective binders, like charcoal and ochre pepsin and different kinds of clays and things
Man,
like
my
that.
toe hurts. Fuck.
In my experience, that those work, but they take much longer. Most people would like to get better faster, so we use the more aggressive therapy. After you go through those 2 steps and we see that you're improving, usually your VCS test that was previously negative is now positive, or is normal. We usually draw some blood work to look at
A lot of
tests that you had
Asians.
previously that were abnormal. And based on which ones continue to be abnormal, the rest of the therapy follows Dr. Shoemaker's on what's called the pyramid. And we just go up the pyramid. And when we've gone through all of those steps and corrected or attempted to correct the various different systems of inflammation that were still causing abnormalities in the lab test, after that, we contemplate whether usage of intranasal VIP is useful. For most patients, it is. Certainly, in my experience, if you have not recovered at least 70% of your energy, 70% of your cognitive ability, 70% of your exercise tolerance, if you haven't recovered those from the rest of the therapy, then it's time for VIP.
You said if you have or haven't.
If you have not. So I'm anticipating every one of my patients will recover at least 70 and up to 90% of their
That's weird.
previous capability, if they can follow the protocol as I just outlined.
Okay, so I've been trying this cholestyramine, and so what I found with it, and this is still a tentative conclusion on my part, but first, to begin with, it seemed to make my symptoms quite a bit worse, even at a relatively low dose. And then I moved the dose up and down for a while, and I seemed to find a dose that wasn't disturbing me. So what it was doing to me was producing symptoms of psychomotor slowing. So it was harder for me to do things. I was thinking more slowly. I had more pain, especially in the morning, more depressive malaise, none of which, as you obviously know, is particularly pleasant. And if I decreased the dose enough, that went away. A week ago, I increased the dose again, and then those symptoms came back. And so why, I know that that's not uncommon, that return of symptom, and that means that the dose should be decreased. But that obviously makes treating this even more complicated, because when you first start using the binder, it can make what's wrong with you worse. So what does the binder do, and why might it be the case that it would make symptoms worse, and who would be susceptible particularly to that worsening of symptoms?
Oh, I didn't know that. I never heard about that.
Intensification, which is the word that I use for people who got worse when they took cholestyramine. We found that pre-treatment, usually with compounds that would reduce inflammatory responses, reduce cytokines, pre-treatment would say 5 to 7 days, and then restarting cholestyramine at low dose for another 5 to 7 days, increase the dose 5 or 7 days, and at the end of the month you get up to the full dose of cholestyramine and you go off the extra medications. Omega-3 fatty acids are widely used for this. They work very nicely. Lactose is a beautiful drug. It's got an FDA black box on it for another reason.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's still available, and it's for people that are worse. Now, most commonly, when people intensify, there are either two problems pre-existing that we would know if we had done the evaluation. If you have a multiply antibiotic-resistant coagulase negative staph,
you're just a product of your environment. You're an animal that's habituated to your habitat.
And you treat with binders, there can be intensification because this organism makes a toxin, a polycystic ether toxin, polycyclic ether toxin.
It's like when people could get sick when they go down to South America, Central America, because they can get
toxins that are bound to a receptor.
Some sickness from the fruit on the trees. It's got a different type of mold on it or something. It's called
response of the receptor to suddenly release all cytokines that are bound, and so
Montezuma's revenge
will create a cytokine storm.
It's a flu-like sickness.
Illness for this is post-Lyme syndrome.
Because we're not used to the habitat or something. It's like how people wasn't supposed to drink the water.
Pre-treat with omega-3s for 5 days, start low-dose cholestyramine, and away you go. Now, for other people who don't have Marcons and who don't have Lyme disease, we found that paradoxically, the last step, or VIP, can be used in low doses, microdoses, as the first step. And this is from a textbook.
Oh, I never heard about that.
On the art and science of Serves Medicine. It's called the low VIP protocol, and we can start people on that, get through the intensification, decrease the VIP, increase the cholestyramine or will call, and people sail on. But they've got to be willing to take things slowly and defeat the intensification monster, because it is horrible. It is absolutely horrible, having experienced it myself.
So what does it mean for people? So, when I'm contemplating this and contemplating doing something about it, I'm wondering, well, what's the implication here for travel?
I heard COVID was affecting those people more too.
Almost eat nothing, which makes me, an annoying guest in many ways. And now,
but I thought it was just because of the
if I'm
food.
sensitive to these sorts of toxins, that also means
or
that
diet, how healthy you eat in your diet.
For me to travel and to visit people, and if you recover, if you're in a clean environment and you recover, and you use the treatment protocol that you described, what does that do in terms of people's
different breeds, different needs?
Resistance, assuming they're not living in an absolutely mold-saturated house.
We got mold.
NSH levels don't rise, which is the most common situation. The susceptibility has not changed because your HLA has not changed. But with low MSH, if you go somewhere to a hotel or an airplane, and you reacquire Marcons, because they're ubiquitous in the environment, and the Marcon starts to grow, you will relapse and recrudesce with your symptoms within 3 days. Folks who travel extensively, like I used to, will be on medications on a prophylactic basis and take them on a regular basis. I have a room sanitizer that I use when I travel, and I would go into a hotel room and plug that in to clean out the hotel room, because whatever the kind of heating devices they might have in the corner underneath the window that has some humidity coming out to try to keep up with heat, or the air cooling system. But hotels are notoriously with carpets next to bathrooms and kids playing in the bathroom. Oh, let's play hockey and saturate the rug. And you don't know it was there saturated a week ago. And you walk into it, it looks fine. But you are basically re-exposing yourself. It means that you need to manipulate your environment as best you can as your first guess, but then you need to take medication on a regular basis. Fortunately, the side effects of low-dose VIP are essentially zero. So that's a way you can live. As far as the carnivore diet, as you reduce the inflammatory result of using veggies and other things that are not carnivore food, you will find that VIP is your good friend, and will be something helpful to let you expand your diet once you have achieved the maximum medical improvement from the carnivore diet.
Do you think, this is a slight sideways move and I won't pursue it for long, but do you think that there's any association between SIRS and the obesity epidemic?
Oh my goodness, you're describing leptin resistance. Leptin is made by a GP130 cytokine receptor in the brain, right in the hypothalamus where MSH is involved. And leptin must bind to its receptor, send off a STAT1 signal to turn on production of POMC, pro-opiomelanocortin, to make MSH. So if you're leptin resistant because of weight problems, you don't turn on MSH, and so that by itself will turn on fatigue, pain, and then now obesity. And what a triad. And a good day, a good month for a leptin-resistant patient, not to mention an insulin-resistant patient, or an MSH deficient, is half a pound per month.
Yeah, we are
That's
different.
on a good day.
Yeah, different breeds, different needs.
So what do you think about this? Okay, well, I've been reviewing the statistics lately, not only with regard to the prevalence of obesity, let's say in the United States, but also to its rate of increase. And the last projection I read was something like 40% of Americans will be grossly obese, morbidly obese by the year 2030. 40%. And that's well, it's impossible to overstate what a catastrophe that is.
That's half the SIRS patients. If you look at someone who weighs 300 pounds, we're not going to use pedantic terms like morbidly obese. Yeah. Specifically, when weight's a problem, what's leptin? What are adipocytokines doing?
Nice.
What's insulin doing? And more importantly, what's molecular hypometabolism doing? Because we've got a prescription now, we've been using it, that will defeat the mechanisms, the physiologic mechanism for weight storage and fat storage. We looked at adipocytokines and brown fat, and we wanted to turn on brown fat. Uncoupling protein 1, 2, and 3 were found. It used to be just 1, but uncoupling 1, 2, and 3 are found.
Yeah, there's so much that can be done.
Brown fat and have increased metabolic consumption of energy by turning on brown fat activation. This is one of the advantages from Finland again. Here we heat you up and you have a nice sauna, and then we tend to let you go out and jump into a snowbank. Without making shivering, that turns on brown fat physiology, that turns on energy production like crazy. It's wasting heat. Non-shivering thermogenesis is what that is.
Okay. How many papers have you two published between you that are related specifically to this topic, approximately?
Over 60.
Okay, so
we get two together, we're 60.
Okay.
I have no idea what they're talking about. Yeah, people should be able to work in peace. Hmm. Yeah. My nigga got mold sickness. Fuck. My nigga got mental illness because of mold. Goddamn. No. That might be... Man. Where it got wet, just go ahead and rip it up. Get you some shit to redo a drywall. It gets mold just from being humid in the house. That's why they gotta have a hole in a building. When you build the building, it's got codes where it's gotta have a hole at the top, like on the top floor, so it's not too humid up there or something, because it'll get moldy or something. So it's about ventilation. That dude was talking about he got some kind of air purifier, like air sanitizer, room sanitizer. Sounds like he made it sound like he brought it with him and he turned it on and it was cleaning the room, but I don't know what that was. There's so many different strains of yeast floating in the air and landing everywhere. Yeah, just like fungus. Man, what are you gonna do? Nigga ain't the same until he goes outside and then he's like free. You got bacteria inside, you got bugs outside. So, is that why they had open roof houses? Is that why they had open roof houses in the past? Because they didn't want to get mold sickness? Did the ancients know about it? I bet they did. That's probably why they had open walled roofs. So So basically, you need this pipe that's going from outside to inside and bringing in a shit ton of air, or, you know, that's why Swiss cheese and other varieties are different from region to region. Wines as well. Ugh. My wine tastes different because it got a different bacteria. That's weird. Yeah, they say the sweat is bacteria, so bacteria poop. That guy got different bacteria. I can smell it. Oh, okay. So Swiss comes from the Swiss Alps or something. Damn. See, Darnell's smart. He's a genius. They knew he was a... Yo, Darnell, are you a dude or a woman? They knew Darnell was a genius since 5th grade. So you're a dude and a woman put together as one? You was born a dude and a woman? You're a man and a woman. Well, wow, you were able to have kids? And breastfeed? Yeah, I couldn't breastfeed, so... Fuck yeah, fucking right, America, fuck yeah. Just don't hurt yourself while having fun, you know? Crash Bandit, Cash Bandit. Semi-male chromosomes. Yeah, that's really crazy. I didn't know it was even chromosomes. Darnell semi-cloned from a male. Man, you can keep your shoes on inside. I'm all good with that. You don't have to take your shoes off. Cause I stubbed my toe and that shit hurt. If you were a true clone, that wouldn't be possible. How does it feel to be a clone? Yo, Darnell, you good? Are you good, Darnell? It's alright feeling... it feels good to be a clone. That shit hurts, man. Shit hurts. My baby toe got fucked. Well, that was really informative. Damn. I hate waiting on my toe to heal. Well, that's cool. Yeah. That sucks.
This episode has probably been the most difficult so far in terms of figuring out how to untangle this very, very deep topic. Because today we're talking about something which most people would think ought to be indisputably valuable to any scientist or philosopher or truth seeker out there. And that is the truth. After all, philosophy is synonymous with the love of wisdom, and therefore with seeking the truth. But unlike most philosophers, Nietzsche's relationship with the truth is very complex, and more importantly, his relationship with truth seeking is complex. And because of the nature of this topic, at a certain point it almost becomes difficult to talk about, and you start to hit up on the very limitations of what's even possible to say with language. And so it becomes just one of the more difficult aspects of Nietzsche's philosophy to understand. And therefore, when it comes to the Nietzschean view of truth, there are a lot of bad takes out there. The reason for this isn't because people are being dishonest or because they're stupid or because they have ulterior motives, at least not in general. I mean, it certainly applies to some people. But I think it is because Nietzsche's views are developed over multiple works, and the complete threads of his ideas cannot be fully understood without following them throughout the whole canon. And sometimes there are things that are contradictory or appear contradictory, but if you understand the whole development of his thought, you can make sense of those contradictions. So first, how Nietzsche understood his relationship to the truth. It evolved, but it is a relationship, and he describes it here in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. a short passage which he quotes himself before one of the sections of Genealogy of Morality. Nietzsche does like to occasionally quote himself, but anyway, here's the passage, quote, "Brave, unconcerned, mocking, violent. Thus wisdom wants us. She is a woman and loves only a warrior." End quote. So again, Nietzsche had almost a personal relationship to his own thoughts, feelings, and moods. It's not unusual for him to personify a concept such as the truth. And of course it's a woman because he is a man and a philosopher, and truth is the thing he desires, the thing that he is chasing. He uses the same metaphor elsewhere when he begins the preface to Beyond Good and Evil with the question, "Supposing truth is a woman, what then?" And I love that quotation. When people, I just imagine someone hears about Nietzsche and invariably, they go and turn to one of his more famous books like Beyond Good and Evil. So they pick up Beyond Good and Evil, and the first thing they're hit with in the preface, the very first section, is that question, which just stops you in your tracks because it's such a perplexing question. And it immediately reframes, your thinking. It stops you cold. Supposing truth is a woman, what then? It's like, what does that mean? So Nietzsche gives some indication. I mean, he writes in that same preface that philosophers up to this point have been very inexpert with women. That they've been, the implication here is that they've been clumsy. They've been ungraceful. They're not willing, or perhaps not able, to court the truth or to seduce the truth. And so we might look at the common, what would you call it, the common wants of the philosopher, the common desires of the philosopher to dominate the opposing ideologies, to be proven right, to put truth into tables of categories, and so on. These are clumsy ways to win a woman's heart. So Nietzsche thinks that truth must be romanced, and to put things into more chauvinistic terms, won. The truth must be won. This is really the metaphor here, the heart of the metaphor. Philosophers must win the heart of the truth, just as the warrior in the old days, the Neolithic hunters or Bronze Age city-states.
Well, if it wasn't
warrior
fucking
distinguishes
black,
himself in battle.
maybe I could see it.
Yes, he wins the hearts of the women in his tribe, because a true woman loves only a warrior. And so again, we're speaking archaically here, but Nietzsche thinks archaically at times, and he's often opposed to modern ideas. So the metaphor for truth here, it's not as much of a statement about women or about truth with a capital T. This is a metaphor for the
I stubbed my toe because
relationship
this
to the
is
truth,
black.
as we said, or what Nietzsche wants his own philosophical relationship to the truth to be. And so, with that out of the way, there are a few basic principles when trying to understand the Nietzschean view of truth. And I've come up with 3 of them.
Fucking oven, fucking kerosene heater, now black chair.
Or categorize these principles differently, or name more of them than 3. That's all fine. I'm not claiming an absolute blueprint here. This is just what I would consider to be 3 straightforward principles.
Don't color it black.
Once fully understood, illumine the whole of Nietzsche's view on truth, at least roughly the whole of it. And notice I'm not saying epistemology.
Oh, yeah.
This is not.
Well, I hope you get some good soon.
Is not a system for determining how we know what we know about reality, or for being certain that our truth claims are correct. This is Nietzsche critiquing, evaluating
the energy
activity of truth-seeking and our evaluation of the activity of truth-seeking, what Nietzsche calls the will to truth. To the extent that you could argue that this is epistemological, it's apophatically epistemological. So it's Nietzsche pointing out the limits of the will to truth and warning us against
Damn, that
error.
sucks.
And these considerations are not really ontological either, because Nietzsche's not concerned with trying to determine the true nature of being or anything like that. Usually those pursuits are based on being tricked by language or being tricked by not find ourselves tricked. So now for the three principles. The first is the truth is not the good. The second is all truth is human. And the third is humans need
Is it the Nietzsche
lies.
black pill?
So I'll clarify these briefly before
Monster
diving into
300
all the source
mocha.
material.
Damn.
The first principle, that the truth is not the good. What is meant by this is that Nietzsche inverts the relationship between the truth and the good as given by the ancient Greeks and continued by the Christians, and still a widely held secular prejudice to this very day. That is to say, the truth as synonymous with or correlated with goodness, what is moral, what furthers your health,
Cinemix.
happiness, and well-being. The truth will set you free, as
Nuh-uh.
we say, in an idiom we use in modern times. Or in Christianity,
No, I ain't heard of
the
it.
Jesus is, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So the correlation of all those things. Nietzsche says, no, the truth is sometimes unrelated to what is good for us, and is often harmful to the good. And he would even argue that, to some extent, too much truth.
Yo, what up,
always
Malachi Crazy Thunder?
harmful. The second idea, or second principle, is all truth is human. That there is no means of escaping from the phenomenal world and making statements about the noumenal world. We never touch the true world directly. In fact, Nietzsche thinks we ought to abolish the very idea of a true world and live entirely within this definitively human world, which is the only world we'll ever know. Such an attitude means
That sounds
we can make
nasty,
no truly
Darnell.
ontological claims in the sense of true being separate from human perception. Every single truth claim is therefore indelibly a human truth. Truth is therefore not separable from the human experience of it or from the human expression of it. So to draw a distinction there is folly. Finally, the third principle, and this is perhaps the scariest for many people, Nietzsche claims that human beings need lies. In fact, he even wonders at times how it is that human beings ever came to desire the truth at all. It doesn't make sense. If knowing the truth is harmful in many cases, why would we develop a will to truth? Many of the most cherished things to humanity, which ground humanity metaphysically and morally, the things that explain to us our place in the world and in our society and so on, are lies.
Yeah, Malachi, just you and Darnell up in this
Therefore,
bitch.
that man needs lies, or what we might call necessary fictions, if you don't want to use the term lies. We need these in order to live. These three principles can all be posited separately, but importantly, if one doesn't really confront
I don't know
the
if
full
it's true.
consequences of all three
I hope it ain't
principles, they will not fully understand Nietzsche's view of truth. And so we might notice an immediate difference already in this sort of rough outline of the Nietzschean view of truth that I've given. We might notice a difference from someone like, for example, Jordan Peterson. He gives of Nietzsche's views. I have to bring up Jordan again because he is perhaps the most popular spokesman for Nietzsche today, and his mistakes, therefore, have serious consequences. And so I'll quote from him from a lecture that Jordan gave, where he says something that he often repeats in one form or another. Quote, one
time I heard Alex Jones say that was in Pepsi.
Serves life. And that's a very different idea than the purpose of truth, say, as an accurate representation of the objective world, end quote.
I don't want to believe it.
Now, this is not a direct quote of Nietzsche or one of his maxims, but there are passages in Nietzsche's work that purport a view of truth that sounds similar to this. So I'm not going to say...
Yeah, Darnell, I've heard the
Jordan
same
is
shit
making it
before,
out of whole cloth.
but I don't know if it's
But
true.
notice that Jordan's three-word explanation of Nietzsche's view on truth, that is, truth serves life, leaves out so much important information. Most importantly, it completely excludes the third principle, that lies serve life also. The idea of a truth serving life is one thing, And the idea of a lie serving life is quite another. And Jordan, to my knowledge, has never addressed this. I mean, really, he believes it is immoral to lie, ever. And actually, the Nietzschean view is much closer to the idea that truth, more often than not, harms life. The need to tear down the unquestionable beliefs of one's culture
Oh yeah.
and subject those beliefs to rational inquiry. Well, this is what we might call Socratism, challenging all that was once taken for granted. This approach to life and knowledge, which is often seen as the birth of philosophy. Nietzsche thinks an excess of this attitude is the equivalent of a pathological condition, especially when taken to a societal scale. It heralds the doom of your society. And so the destruction of lies is what is harmful to life for Nietzsche. For in pursuit of truths, man only finds what is human. You search hard enough and eventually one is left with no capital T truths at all. No absolute truths, only relative human truths. And so that is the consequence of having no quote-unquote
Are you
true
vaping?
world.
You think it's worse than smoking?
You get rid of the absolute and you're left only with your own human perspective.
And you're smoking?
So, while I understand what Jordan
The
is
first
trying to
time I
get at,
tried,
we'll hear some of Nietzsche's writings that approximate
the
that sentiment.
vaporizer, it was a
Truth
Magic Flight vaporizer.
serves life.
I got
It's actually
sick
a very bad summary
for like 3
of the
days.
Nietzschean attitude to truth. And I was guilty of falling for this characterization
I
myself.
thought it was the
once upon a
toothpaste because I went and bought some
time.
toothpaste that
Because,
didn't
again,
have
Jordan is
fluoride
not,
in it.
strictly speaking, incorrect.
Or was that a
What he's
different
done is
time?
that he's oversimplified things to the point of being wrong. So upon first glance, the formulation truth serves life or truth ought to serve life might make sense. But over time, you realize that this is not a good interpretation because it doesn't give the entire picture. So now, we'll discuss the principles in more depth. And
Yeah,
begin
first
with
time I
the first
vaped,
principle.
but it's not really a
As I laid
vape.
out, the truth is not the good.
I mean, it gets hot,
To illustrate
but it's
this,
like
we'll look to Beyond Good and
brass
Evil,
or copper or something.
Book 2, aphorism 39. And I'll
I
quote
thought the
about
brass
first
got
half
me sick.
of the aphorism. Quote, "No one will readily consider a doctrine true simply because it makes us happy or virtuous, except perhaps the gentle idealists who go into raptures about the good, the true, and the beautiful, and allow all sorts of colorful, clumsy, and good-natured desirable things to swim around in confusion in their pond. Happiness and virtue are no arguments. But people, even prudent people, do like to forget that causing unhappiness and evil are by the same token no counter-arguments. Something could well be true, although it is at the same time harmful and dangerous to the highest degree.
No, they gotta,
In
no.
fact, it could even be part of the fundamental composition of existence that people are destroyed when they fully recognize this point, so that the strength
See,
of the spirit
That's why it's
might
better
be
to use
measured by
fire.
how much it could still endure of the truth, or, put more clearly, by the degree it would have to have truth diluted, sweetened, muffled, or falsified.
Ugh.
But there is no doubt about the fact that evil and unhappy people are more favored and have a greater probability of success in discovering certain parts of the truth. To say nothing of the evil people who are happy, a species which moralists are silent about. Perhaps toughness and cunning provide more favorable conditions for the development of the strong, independent spirit and the philosopher than that gentle, refined, conciliatory good nature, and that art of taking things lightly, which people value in a scholar and value rightly." End quote. The passage is fairly self-explanatory. It serves to decouple the association with truth and goodness. And Nietzsche even raises the possibility that perhaps existence is so constituted that to know the truth is to be destroyed. And perhaps there are parts of the truth that the evil person is better to equip to understand than a good person. We might think of the insights into human nature one gains.
Yeah, they can't just use no cheap stuff to
extreme
vape.
experiences, such as during wartime.
No cheap metal.
Think on how a person who thrived.
That's
in
what it
such
is, huh? They're
an
using
environment,
cheap metals or
a
something.
sadist or a
The
barbarian,
metals are getting people
might
sick.
be able to learn things about human nature
From the
that no one
coils.
else could.
I had a vape, but it
it's
broke. The
based
battery
on
went out.
the movie Apocalypse Now, or the book it was based on, Heart of Darkness. That's what that text and the film are both about. Or it's one strong theme that through horror and suffering and immorality and so on, one achieves a sort of enlightenment. One gains access to wisdom that civilized men don't have access to. So Nietzsche thinks, he hints at it at the end here, but he thinks there's a serious difference between a philosopher and a scholar. While most people would see those things as hand in hand, Nietzsche thinks that a modern scholar or scholar of one day, they were not capable of becoming great philosophers.
That is
They
terrible.
become studious, tamed drones, trained in one specialty or another. They're not thinking particularly
No
creatively.
way.
They're experimenting and studying, but it's all by rote. That's his.
See, we can't even trust stuff made in different
But there's
countries.
an even deeper issue.
You gotta test that
issue.
shit.
And I think it's the fact that knowledge is opposed in a deep sense to human well-being. Nietzsche quotes from Lord Byron in another work, in Human All Too Human. It's like right at the beginning of I believe the second or perhaps the third book of Human All Too Human. But it's these three lines of poetic verse from Lord Byron. Quote, "Sorrow is knowledge. Those who know the most must mourn the deepest o'er the fatal truth. The tree of knowledge is not the tree of life." End quote. So there we have Byron using a Christian metaphor to overturn the basic Christian idea of goodness and truth as linked. So of course the tree of knowledge of good and evil is what Adam and Eve ate from, and because they tasted forbidden knowledge, they were expelled from the garden and expelled from their communion with God. So in that case, truth did not serve life.
Oh.
The tree of life, meanwhile, was a symbol of God's gift of everlasting life to mankind, which was said to be in the midst of the Garden of Eden. So this is a wonderful quotation that Nietzsche chose for expressing the problem. The unquestionability of one's values provides a sort of strength. At the zenith of an empire's power, for example, their aims and their goals and their beliefs are unquestioned. Their truths are proved by their own success. Nietzsche saw the rise of what he called the theoretical approach to life as a symptom of the decline of Hellenic Greece, for example.
Them people weird.
Something that hastened its
They
decline.
weird.
What replaced the old religious certainties of Hellenic Greece was a skeptical approach to life, a scientific worldview,
They weird too.
optimism for the future. And so he talks about this in his 1886 preface to The Birth of Tragedy. He compares this optimism to the naive fantasy of the terminal patient who imagines that somehow he will miraculously get better. Because he cannot conceive of and therefore refuses to believe in his own mortality. What you desire is in some sense what you lack, and so a culture that needs optimism is a culture without a future. Whereas Nietzsche says that Greek tragedy during the time when Hellenic Greece was still vivacious and strong was a, quote, neurosis of the healthy. And I've talked about this before, but it's just important to sort of, the one piece of the puzzle here to recap is his position on Socrates and Socratism, what he broadly calls, in more general terms, the theoretic approach to life. So in that book, In Birth of Tragedy, Nietzsche, I think, first really raises the issue of knowledge as threatening to life. And this is in section 7. Quote, "Knowledge kills action. Action requires the veils of illusion. That is the doctrine of Hamlet, not that cheap wisdom of Jack the Dreamer, who reflects too much and, as it were, from an excess of possibilities, does not get around to action. Not reflection, no. True knowledge, an insight into the horrible truth, outweighs any motive for action, both in Hamlet and in the Dionysian man." End quote. So even that might require a bit more explanation as to why knowledge kills action. First of all, he's of course referring to Hamlet from Shakespeare's play, who his central conflict in the play is when and how to act, and being sort of paralyzed with indecision. And Nietzsche basically alleges that this is out of an insight into the horrible truth that has paralyzed Hamlet, not just sort of, in excess of possibilities. But to further explain what he's talking about here, elsewhere in the book, he quotes from Goethe's conversations with Eckermann. It's like a series of letters between Goethe and Eckermann. He quotes a conversation where Goethe says that productivity is not simply limited to books and plays and poems, but that there is a, quote, productivity of deeds. And in the same conversation, or in quoting it, Nietzsche praises what he calls the non-theoretical man, the man of action. So we might imagine a soldier in a life or death struggle on the battlefield. The power of being unreflective, the power of being unself-critical. The power of this is you simply accept the quote-unquote truths as they're given to you by your culture or by your superiors, and when it's time to act, you simply act. The soldier who, in that situation, is self-critical and is questioning, maybe he's questioning whether the war effort is even worth it, or whether the cause is just, or whether his own nation might be at fault to some degree. Whoever were to allow these considerations to be real for him and serious, well, he's going to be impeded in his duties as a soldier. Maybe he'll die, or he'll be less effective. So, most of us philosophy nerds, we don't tend to romanticize the soldier's life. So we might think, well, who cares what makes a good soldier? And to this, I would simply say, I use this example because it's a case where you face an existential threat, to yourself or to your society, or possibly to your whole way of life. And at the very least, in a battle, you face a threat to yourself, your own body and your own life. And so we can, from our coziness and our comfort behind the walls of civilization, discount the advantages of believing unquestioningly in the tenets of our society. But on the battlefield, this advantage is well known. Any situation in which our existence depends on it, acting quickly, decisively, that in that point, having an absence of self-criticism or self-reflection is paramount. I could see one arguing that conviction and self-criticism, these can coexist, but I would reply that,
Yeah, don't think, just do. Just be in the moment and do it. Trust yourself, know thyself, and just do and keep it going. But I understand what they're trying to say. Knowing too much. You gotta have some privacy, you gotta have some little lies. Can't be honest about everything. Yada, yada, yada. I don't know if this song's even gonna get any better. No. Nope. Well, that's a good reason to put a pavilion over your trailer house. You ever seen a trailer house with a pavilion over it? Like another roof? I don't know, that's pretty tall though. It's like having a two-story building, a two-story home. Get on up there. Get another mobile home. That sucks. No, just build a pavilion up on top. It'll last longer. Yeah, good luck with that. Boris Brecha. about to hop in the shower.